showed you The Apprentice. Now it's time for The Master. Hi, I'm Lucille Lovisi, and today I have another junk journal to share with you. This one is Edgar Allan Poe's. Edgar Allan Poe, much earlier than Lovecraft. We're talking about pre-Civil War, 1820s, 30s. He died in, I think it was 49, did I say? So I have this junk journal, supposed to look like it was from the 1800s. And I've showed you previous videos. I'm now decided to include an ephemera guide. I do sell these at shows and on eBay. And so I learned so much when researching these. I wanted to share some of the interesting things that I found out doing these journals. So let's open up Edgar Allan Poe's first page, and you'll see he has lots of stuff going on in here. He's got 3 notebooks in here with poetry and notes. Tamerlane was his first published poem or published piece. That's 1827, I believe it came out. He was a cadet at West Point Academy. I don't know, I never knew that. I found out that he enlisted in the military under an assumed name and underage. Actually, he lied about his age. So the first thing that I learned about Edgar Allan Poe is that his last name was Poe. His name was Edgar Poe. And he, at 3 years old, his mother died from tuberculosis. His father had abandoned the family before then. And his mother died of tuberculosis. Some affluent families in Richmond, Virginia took the children. A couple took Edgar, and they never officially adopted Edgar. So he used their name in the middle. They were the Allens. So Edgar Poe is his birth name, and he took the Allen from his adoptive parents, quote unquote adoptive, because they never adopted him. So he used it as Edgar Allan Poe. He kept his birth surname. So there's just little notes and things and books and stuff written in here. This is another poetry book where I have some notes that as if he was writing. So this one is Alone. This one is Two, title 2. And then of course The Raven. And I have in here like a mistake or he changed his mind on something. This is my tip to Blues Traveler. If you're a fan of Blues Traveler, they have a song and he says, "Once upon a midnight dearie." And that's what I put first and crossed it off and then made him change it to dreary. Probably the most famous, or one of the most famous poems of Edgar Allan Poe. Now this is the journaling portion of the book. And we'll open it up and see what we have in here. So in here I have a mourning ribbon for his wife, Virginia. Mourning ribbons were very common when someone passed away.
He loved her very much. So.
Yeah, he loved her very much. And many people say he never got over her death. He never recovered from it. Of course, we believe that Annabel Lee was written for Virginia. And the interesting thing that I learned that I never knew, from letters that he had written to people, he tried to take his own life after her death by taking an ounce of laudanum, and it didn't work. And he wrote to someone that even an ounce of laudanum was not enough to put me out of my misery.
So you did a lot of research on this.
I really did, and they say that they found him many nights sleeping on her grave. Like he was just so stricken after that. He had a hard life. He you know, it's interesting. He went through stages. Like the tragedy of his parents separating, his mother dying young, and then being adopted. He was adopted into an affluent family. He was raised basically with money. He had the best of everything. And then after his adoptive mother died, I'm saying adoptive, they raised him, they never adopted him. after his adoptive mother died, who loved him very much and he loved her very much. He never really had a good relationship with his father, and that relationship completely ended after that, and Poe was destitute from then on until death, and he never recovered financially after that. He tried. He was not like Lovecraft. This dude, okay, so he, as an adult, they say never lived in the same place more than 3 years. That was the longest place he ever lived, and he was traveling constantly to get a job someplace else. He was editors. In fact, I think, is this the one? No, this is, okay, so in here I have the amount of money that he had made from just selling different stories. I have, maybe it's here, it's sort of like his resume. Oh, I forgot the flip out.
Yeah. And he was a working writer.
I don't even know my own journal.
And he was a working writer too.
Yeah, so these are, he had all these jobs. He was an editor, and when he took these editor positions, they were always contributor editors. So he always had a way to publish his own stories, his own poems, wherever he worked, which was a win-win situation. Lovecraft could have done that. Lovecraft was offered the editorship at Weird Tales, but he didn't want to go to Chicago. He turned it down. That would have been the best thing for him to do. Can you imagine what would have happened if Lovecraft took that editorship at Weird Tales and would have been the editor of Weird Tales? I can't even imagine what would have happened.
He knew all the writers.
Edgar Allan Poe did. He went, if somebody needed him in New York, he went to New York. There are 4 Poe museums because he lived in 4 places that everyone wants to claim him for their own. In Virginia, in Boston, Baltimore, even in the Bronx, which he didn't really live in the Bronx technically. It was still Westchester at that time. It became the Bronx later on. But there's a Poe museum there in the house that he lived in.
And he wrote stories in all these magazines, right?
He wrote poems and or stories. This is interesting. I never really knew that there was a big feud. So he was called like the Tomahawk or something because of the way he chopped up people's works in his criticism of them. And he was especially critical of Longfellow too, and they had a feud.
Henry
Wadsworth, yes. Poe wasn't a fan, and he publicly accused him of plagiarism. And when Longfellow pushed back, he published his examples of why he believed he was a plagiarist. And so I have a note about that in here, just referring to this. Really interesting. I put some cards in here because we know he loved to gamble. It ruined his life in a lot of ways, but he did love it. And a popular game at the time was dominoes, card dominoes. They didn't, have sets, but they had cards. And oftentimes when you see them, they're very rare, but if you see them, they'll cut actual playing cards in half and with ink, pen, just draw a line and write the numbers and make their own dominoes. But there is a cards dominoes rules, and I put it in the journal, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so let's see what else. Let's move along. This is an Johann Tieck was an especially favorite of Poe's. This is interesting. This is an actual copy of a theater program in which, remember I said his Poe's parents were actors. In this, it lists his mother in the role of Cordelia in King Lear. And this is a photocopy of that, a little photocopy of it, but a photocopy nonetheless of that. Let's see. Okay, this I reproduced or tried to reproduce the military papers, Massachusetts with an F, of Edgar Perry. And that's the name he enrolled in the military, and he lied. He said he was 22 years old. He was, they say, closer to 17. And he got $6, which is probably why he did it, why he enrolled, for the money. Because by this time, he was cut off pretty much from his father. He wasn't giving him money anymore.
That was probably the bounty for joining.
Yeah.
They give you money for joining.
$6. And this wasn't found until, it wasn't known until, a few years ago, where an eagle-eyed student at one of the colleges was West Point was going through the files and found it. So in all of my journals, I try to do a pop-up. I really like to have some kind of a feature. And in this one, I used from the Telltale Heart. And there's the last line of the Telltale Heart. And we know that you move the chair and you lift the floorboards. And there's the skeleton underneath the floor, on the floorboards. So I put that in there. Okay, here's my paper clip. There's a little journal. And this, interesting, I reproduced it of a bankrupt petition. So Edgar Allan Poe filed for bankruptcy in December 19th of 1842. And the interesting thing that this was just one part of it, the personal statement that he writes. So it says, the petitioner is possessed of no property, real, personal, or mixed, beyond his having, beyond his wearing apparel, and a few printed sheets of no use to anyone else and of no value to anyone, attested by this representative of the government, and Edgar signed it. And I was saying to Gary, can you imagine? It says a few printed sheets of no use to anyone or any value. Can you imagine how much a few sheets of printed Poe papers would be worth today?
Might be his manuscript, or maybe tear sheets from a magazine of his stories. Yeah.
I have
or poems.
some money. State of Massachusetts. Again, these Massachusetts with the F's. Interesting Old English, eh? These are just, this is a handwritten account of Edgar Allan Poe's swimming record. So apparently he was a very skilled swimmer. He was a weightlifter, a boxer. Never knew any of that stuff about.
A drinker.
Yeah. No, actually they say that he was more of, he had a higher intolerance to alcohol, more so than being an alcoholic. Yes, he did drink. He liked to drink. But he had a low tolerance for alcohol, which did not help. This is interesting. So I found out also another writer at the time, Thomas Dunn English, was another rival of Poe. Poe criticized him like crazy. He hated his poems, hated with a capital H. And English took it upon himself to become, they used to, I guess if it was on Twitter or whatever today, they would be having like Twitter wars. So any opportunity that they had to take a shot at each other, they did it.
Criticize
and
each
actually
other.
the nastiest thing is that this dude wrote his eulogy, and that, you know, is unforgiven. So there was a thing that Thomas Dunn, another underhanded thing that Thomas Dunn English did was he wrote a poem called The Lady Hubbard. And it was a parody of Old Mother Hubbard. And it was published in Goodies magazine, Ladies Magazine, under the name of E.A. Poe. So Thomas Dunn English wrote it, but he wrote it and he used the name E.A. Poe in it. And it was a nasty, like, you know, criticism of Poe. And Poe died, unfortunately, before he was able to answer in writing of what he did. So in this journal, I tried to give Poe the last word on it, and I'm going to read you what I wrote. So it says, Mr. Thomas Dunn English shall be made to regret his liberalities with my name upon his insidious rhyme in Goodies the Ladies Hubbard. The true beauty in this rhyme lies not within the prose, but in the fact that by imitating me, however poorly, he stumbled upon a method to create his most brilliant work, to which he hath my most satisfying salutation. Edgar Allan Poe, April 1849.
Poe would have been proud.
Unfortunately, he never had a chance to respond, but I am happy with my
Poe would have been proud.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. So now we have, this is a gold ring. And it's not really a gold ring. And it has, you're not going to be able to see it, but it says Edgar inside of the ring. So And I have his hanky here, monogrammed hanky. Everything he had, almost everything he had was monogrammed. Again, because he was raised with, in affluence. So
as a gentleman.
He was a gentleman, and he had the finest things for a period of time in his life. And so when he was in Richmond, he was in love with a girl, Elmira, who lived in the mansion across the road from where they lived. And when he went off to West Point, his adoptive father, Alan, decided that he was not going to allow this marriage to go through. And so he informed the potential fiance's father that he was intending to cut Poe off, and he wasn't going to get his inheritance. He wasn't going to be his heir. And the father then intercepted all of Poe's letters to his fiancée. So she thought he forgot about her. He never responded. He never corresponded with her. So they fixed her up with someone else, and she moved on, and she married another gentleman. It was this guy. So the thing is that after Virginia died, a few years after Virginia died, their paths crossed again. And she was widowed at that time, and they got re-engaged, and Edgar gave her this gold ring, and they were re-engaged later on, and he died before they married. But I think that's a sweet love story. And so this is a period cabinet card that I put in here. It's Maria Poe Clem, who is Virginia's mother or his aunt. He married his first cousin. This is not a picture of Maria Poe Clem.
But that's an actual
card. But it is an actual cabinet card.
From the era, right?
Yes. Okay. Then we move on. And this, I made cabinet card of Edgar Allan Poe.
Let's see that again. There he is.
I like this picture of him.
Yeah, that is nice.
It's like transitional. He was still young, but he was turning into the Edgar that we know.
Yeah.
So I really like that. And I put this in here. Cognac brandy. He supposedly loved brandy. And this Benny Haven's Tavern is the tavern that all of the West Point cadets went to. And he was a favorite patron, I guess you could say, of Benny Haven's. And it's funny, there's a lot of funny stories with that, because the cadets were like really rowdy, and they tried to cut them off with their alcohol, and they always, found a way to go to Benny Haven's.
Tell the story how Tamerlane got published by his...
So in his first published piece, after he was... after his father disowned him, he decided the best revenge would be to get himself thrown out of West Point, because he was still known to be Alan's son. And he decided he was going to get himself thrown out, and he did. But his friends in West Point, they really believed in his writing. They believed in his poems, and they loved his stuff, and they pooled money together, and they had his books published. And I think that was a great testament to him. He was well-liked guy. I mean, the stuff that I read, because a lot of the stuff that I read about him was based on the end of his life and around the controversy with Annabel Lee. So Annabel Lee was published in multiple publications, but each time it was published, he was selling it as the first publication. So everybody who published it thought, I have the exclusive on this, and meanwhile he was selling it all over the place. And actually the last place, what's the name of the Saffrons, the magazine where it's attributed to be the first. I can't think of it, I'm sorry. I'll put it, if I look it up, I'll put it in the description. There's one that is deemed to be the actual true Annabelle Lee, the way we know it, because there was some changes, slight changes to the story, to the poem. And they actually printed above the poem that here is what they thought was the first printing, but it's come to their attention that there are others. So they actually, and it was printed after he died. He had died at this point. But they were frustrated enough that they put in the lead to the poem that they were duped, and while they thought they were buying the first appearance, it had actually appeared before.
And anything with Poe's name on it was very, very popular. I mean, people were reading, were hungry for good literature and good poetry and horror stories and suspense stories in those days. And Poe was like the best of the lot.
Yeah. So this I made. I have several of these like these, not any this small, but in the, before there was electricity, and even after electricity, when there were things not invented, people used fans all the time. They carried them in their pockets, and it was very common for advertising to make fans that folded out like this, and this is a very effective way to keep cool. And so I made a little fan with a newspaper that he most likely had a fan somewhere because it was hot.
They dressed
and they wore a lot of clothes. Yeah, proper men had to wear suits, right?
All the time.
Okay, so I have this. This is an actual 1830s newspaper clipping article in here that I included. I thought that would be cool.
So that's cut from
he was a newspaper man.
Newspaper in 1830?
Yes. Thanks to Morristown.
How dare you?
This is a bogus newspaper, and I wrote as if it was cut out of the newspaper. This is actually the Murder in the Rue Morgue, and so I printed all this, and you can, if you read it, you'll get a good idea, even with the words cut off, that it's the story. And this was a really cool thing that I never knew either. Astounding news by Express via Norfolk. The Atlantic crossed in 3 days. Signal triumph of Mr. Monk Mason's flying machine. So this was printed in a newspaper as a newspaper article. Okay, very similar to the way Orson Welles did War of the Worlds. Like, he had it start on the radio like it was a true emergency
invasion from Mars.
Right. And this same thing happened. It was printed just like this. This was the open.
Another hoax.
And then the story just went. And people believed it. And they were gathering at the news agency. They wanted to find out information. It created like this whole crazy thing. And they say that the H.G. Wells,
Orson Welles.
No,
H.G. Wells.
Is he the one that wrote
Around
the World in 90 Days?
Jules Verne.
Jules Verne.
Was influenced by that?
Yeah, was influenced by this story.
Oh, you saw that? Yeah.
Yeah, but Orson Welles definitely was influenced by this, the presentation of putting the story in a newspaper and then having the story, it's like the headline, and then the story continues. So that was really cool, and I never heard that before. So
there was a lot of hoaxes were put in newspapers in those days, and today too.
All right, we're still going. So I'm going to open this up. We don't have to because this whole thing comes out, but I just want to show you that when I make a journal, I put my mark inside so you'll know that's mine. Not that I'm anybody, but I just do it.
It's a genuine Lucille. You are somebody.
Okay, so then I have this little file in here. And so here's more clippings from the actual 1830s newspaper. So now in here, I wanted to include some of the things. Now, I told you that he filed for bankruptcy. He was always in financial, on his own, even though he worked, and he sold stories, but he was making peanuts, and it was expensive, and he gambled, and he drank, and I'm sure he liked to pay money for the finer things in life, because that's what he was used to. So he wasn't really good at budgeting, I don't think. he was always trying to borrow money from somebody, barter with something. And so, like the gold ring, this is a note on a gold pocket watch that he left with someone for a loan. This was as a security for a loan. He left his penknife with someone. And then in 1849, at the Swan Hotel, the Swan Tavern, which had rooms upstairs, he stayed there. He left his trunk, his wooden trunk, as payment, as a security, right, for payment. Unfortunately, this is when he died, and he died before he was able to go back and get his trunk. And then, but later on, his family was able to retrieve the trunk. Through the years, either the family, the museums, the foundation were able to recover all of these items, and they're back together in, I believe it's the Richmond, Virginia. He considered himself to be a Virginian, and all of these items have found their place back together in the Poe Museum. And that's where they should be.
So you did a lot of research on this.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It was fun to do the research, right?
It was really fun.
Finding out different things.
I love doing it. I love Poe. And I have a lot more, shall I say, understanding and respect and admiration for him. Even though I did have that before, but I thought he was a bit of a scoundrel. It was a little weird marrying his, young cousin. I thought it was like a sleazy thing, but they were truly in love. He was truly a good husband. She was a wonderful wife. She died, unfortunately, by tuberculosis, like a lot of people did in those days. And he was a really interesting guy. He worked, and he was very strict when if he believed that somebody took someone else's ideas. He hated that, and there was probably nothing you could do again after that to win his praise once he believed that you were, taking liberties with other people's ideas. And he had a hard life, and I wish that he would have lived a longer life, because we would have benefited from that. And I just hope you enjoyed this video. I don't want to know I'm jibber jabbering, but yeah, it was just fun, and that's it. And
where can I get the Poe?
Well, my journals are made for the shows, for the pulp shows. I'll do one or two I put on eBay, but I sell them at the shows that we do. But anyway, thanks for watching, and you'll see Gary next video. We're trying to crack the whip, so he'll be pumping more out. Thanks.